It's only June, but that means we're only 2 months away from our drafts, and it's never too early to look at who we like, who we dislike, especially in the later rounds. It's early to have a good start to your draft, but really, what really makes or breaks your team is those sleepers, is those later round picks that can really put your team over the top based off of consensus ADP. But before we get into that, I just want to thank you guys as on the podcast yesterday, we hit 300 subs on the channel. I can't thank you guys enough, but I'm going to keep grinding for y'all. But on that note, if you enjoyed the channel at any point, please support us down below. We're on the road to big 500 now. So just a like or if you want to subscribe, all of it goes a super long way, or even share it. It all goes a super long way as, again, we're on the road to 500. And we can't thank you guys enough that we've gotten even this far. But without further ado, let's get into round 9. Round 9, you see guys like Tua Tagovailoa, Elijah Moore, David Njoku. Again, just to remind you guys, the guys on the left side of your screen with the green boxes, those are guys that are probably my top 3. The other guys that are not highlighted, that doesn't mean I don't like them. It just means I have a preference on my top 3 here in this round. And I will say I messed up here on last week's show, right, where I had Tua as my round 8 selection. And obviously you see he is a round 9. So I had a little mishap there. Regardless, just know I love Tua Tagovailoa going into 2023. And if you want to hear more about Tua, go to my last Friday show as we dive more into him. But David Njoku, right? I want to dive more into David Njoku, a guy who had a strong 2022 year, right? A guy who had basically 60 receptions for 630 yards and 4 touchdowns in only 14 games played. Although he's been in the league since 2017, this guy is going to be 27 this year, so he's still squarely in the prime of his career. And with his athletic ability, with his massive wingspan, paired with the fact that this is going to be a more pass-focused offense this season in Cleveland, David Njoku might be able to take his game to another level and be an elite tight end here in 2023. I will say, as a Browns fan, we do have to worry a little bit for David Njoku about a D-Hop addition, but it looks very slim that D-Hop is going to join the Browns as of right now. And I think out of all receiving options, even if DeAndre Hopkins comes in, I think Njoku might be hurt the least amount out of all the options that we have here in Cleveland. But not to mention, as a Browns fan, Deshaun Watson has looked amazing in minicamp and OTAs. This passing offense has looked crazy so far, which I know, take it with a grain of salt. But I believe a big receiver of a bounce back here from Deshaun Watson could be David Njoku. In round 10, we see guys like Aaron Rodgers, a guy who could change New York and their history. Hopefully have a better time there than Brett Favre did, right? Coming over from Green Bay. But Devon Achane, it's another rookie that could be very interesting there in Miami. But I didn't want to dive more into him because this team might end up with Dalvin Cook, and Achane might just be an afterthought here in 2023. So I want to dive more into Antonio Gibson. With Eric Bieniemy coming over from Kansas City, and he's basically the co-head coach now in Washington, we're all expecting Antonio Gibson to finally be fantasy relevant yet again. But when we look into it, it all just makes too much sense, right? And that scares me just a little bit. But we know Eric Bieniemy, he loves to utilize all of his running backs. He did that in his time in KC, who most times he didn't have the caliber of running back of Antonio Gibson. So it should be a fun year for the both of these guys as they try to work together on the field and effectively at that. But Brian Robinson, we know this. He's going to have the rushing touchdowns, or he's going to have the rushing touches in and outside of the red zone is my point. And that is going to limit the upside of Antonio Gibson. But when this team is going to have to pass the ball, all of the work is going to go to Antonio Gibson out of the backfield, which is always a plus for our fantasy players. This is a team that, to me, is probably going to be down a lot this season, especially because they have a younger quarterback in Sam Howell. So they're going to have to pass a lot late in games. And a lot of that should lead to, basically that's only going to lead to more upside, more opportunity for Antonio Gibson late in games as he's going to be the pass catcher out of the backfield for this team. And Sam Howell could be looking his way a lot, right, in 2023. It is risky because this is a guy who, at one point due to his attitude, was turned into a returner last season. But I believe, in round 10, you can take a little bit of a flyer. Why not take a guy that could really be a running back 2 for your team in 2023 in Antonio Gibson? In round 11, You see Dalton Schultz, a guy who's going to be C.J. Stroud's best friend there. As you'll see here later on, I'm a big fan of this Houston Texans offense. I might grab a couple shares this year. Russell Wilson and Jerick McKinnon, right? But to me, I want to dive a little bit more into Russell Wilson, as I believe a lot of people forget who Russell Wilson is. But Sean Payton, he's now in town, right? We know this. If anybody can salvage Russell Wilson, it is Sean Payton. This is the guy who salvaged Drew Brees' career after his stint in San Diego, which might go, by the way, shout out to Drew Brees. I miss him. But this is the guy in Russell Wilson who his receiving options are still there. He's still going to have Cortland Sutton, a healthy Jerry Jeudy on a contract year, I might add. So he's going to be playing with a chip on his shoulder. Tim Patrick's back after his knee injury. KJ Hamler might finally spread his wings, as well as Marquez Callaway's coming over from the Saints. So this team has a good receiving room, right? This team also signed Mike McGlinchey, one of the best offensive tackles in football, right? He's coming over from the Niners. This O-line is going to be better, so Russell Wilson's not going to be sacked 50-plus times like he was last season. Javonte Williams, I'm not sure when he's going to return from his injury, but when he returns, that's only going to take more pressure off of Russell Wilson. This is a guy who is a quarterback in a stacked AFC West. It is a division that for years has been set for shootouts, which is always good for fantasy football, right? We don't care if they win or lose. We just care about getting our points, right, from our guys. We just have to worry about Russell Wilson and the fact that he's coming off of his worst career year, and can he bounce back from that? I believe if there was any year that Russell Wilson wants to prove he's still Russell Wilson, it's this year, and I believe he can do that here in 2023 with Sean Payton in town. In round 12, we see guys like KJ Osborne, who could be the number 2 there in Minnesota, as well as Jaylen Warren, a guy who, look, not many people believe in Najee Harris after the down year he had last year. Jaylen Warren might be a sneaky round 12 pick. But to me, I want to dive more into Chigoziem Okonkwo, a guy who I think I'm getting better at pronouncing his name. But ultimately, I think he's going to be a top 10 tight end for me when it comes to draft season. This is a guy who was a 4th-round pick last year, and he wasn't primarily used until the second half of the year. But when he did play, he had 32 catches, 450 yards, and 3 touchdowns. This is a guy who averaged 14 yards a catch and about 10 yards a target, right? So, I mean, if 10 yards a target, if he catches the ball, that's 2 points a catch here for our fantasy players and full PPR. But his athleticism and his speed, to me, his athletic ability makes him a tight end 1 alone. It's one of those guys that you just want on your team going into 2023. But to me, he's a low-end tight end 1. You just have to worry about who's going to be throwing him the ball, and will it be efficient if it's not from Ryan Tannehill, whether if it's Will Levis or Malik Willis. I hope if I draft Chigoziem, it is going to be Ryan Tannehill at the quarterback position. Moving over to round 13, you see guys like Alec Pierce, who could be the second receiver there in Indy. You see Donovan Peoples-Jones. You see Greg Dulcich. To me, I want to dive more into Greg Dulcich. This is a guy who last year missed a total of 7 games due to some nagging hamstring injuries. I think it was 2 at the start, 5 to close the year. But regardless, when Dulcich did play, this is a guy who averaged 5.5 targets per game, and he drew 8 or more targets in 4 of his 10 games that he did play this season. If you believe in Russell Wilson like I do, if you believe that Russell Wilson and Sean Payton can bounce back, Dulcich is a very intriguing pick here in 2023, especially in round 13, where let's say you go with Travis Kelce in round 1. You can always back him up with a guy like Greg Dulcich, who can be a low-end tight end 1 here in round 13. So Greg Dulcich, amazing pick, amazing player. I'm excited to draft him or Chig later in my drafts if I miss out on the top guys. But moving over to round 14, you see guys like MVS, Jawan Johnson, or Bryce Young. Bryce Young's simply here because, look, we're now in the territory of it's the last couple rounds of your draft. Who can we draft to stash or take a flyer on that could in one way or another help us down the line, whether if it's with trading or maybe they turn it on late in the season? To me, I want to dive a little bit more into MVS, as this one is simple. This is the guy who is the number 1 offense in Kansas City, right? And if I need to remind you, it's an offense that has Pat Mahomes, Andy Reid, one of the best offenses in the NFL. I will say that the number 1 in this offense should be Kadarius Toney as a Gators fan, but he simply hasn't shown 2 things. 1, he can't be good off the field, and he can't stay healthy on the field. You know, there's also guys that the Chiefs offense has brought in, like Rashee Rice, who's a receiver that Kansas City drafted last year. And, maybe, you're expecting a little bit of something from him this year. But look at what Sky Moore did last year. Sky Moore came in with a lot of hype as a rookie, and he was barely utilized, right? So I believe we can see a similar year from a guy like Rashee Rice, but who knows, right? To me, the only thing that is set in stone each year in the wide receiver room for Kansas City is MVS. There's value in veteranship. There's value in continuity. And MVS, to me, has both of those, in one of the best offenses in the league with the player who is the best guy. He has the best player in the league as his quarterback, a guy who is a two-time MVP, two-time Super Bowl champ, Pat Mahomes, right? To me, if you go running back heavy early, maybe the draft board falls a certain way and you're struggling at receiver, a guy in round 13 or 14 like MVS isn't a bad look late in your drafts. It's a flyer, right? But, he could turn out to be something at least like a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 here late in the year. But moving over to round 15, Jeff Wilson. That's simply if Dalvin Cook doesn't go there, and Raheem Mostert. He's had injury concerns his entire career. Maybe Jeff Wilson can step up and be relevant like he was when he got traded there last season. Trey Lance, all the rumors are pointing towards Brock Purdy being the starter from day one, but with his elbow, maybe Trey Lance, steps in due to poor play from Purdy, and Trey Lance can finally show his untapped potential. But I want to dive a little bit more here into Wan'Dale Robinson, and when I say we're taking flyers late in our drafts, I wasn't kidding, right? This is the guy, Wan'Dale Robinson, who only had a 4-game sample size last year, but when he did play, he had a 22% target share in the offense. There will be a ton of targets and a ton of target competition here that is going to open up this year in the Giants offense. But this team is dying for one of these receivers, whether it's Sterling Shepard, Isaiah Hodgins, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jamison Crowder. They're dying for one of these receivers to step up and be the number one, be the alpha in this offense. And if I had to put my money on anybody, it would be Wan'Dale Robinson. This is a guy who was amazing. He was an amazing player at Kentucky who torched my Gators 2 years in a row. And look, he had one injury that kept him out for a part of last year, but he's healthy. He's back to 100%. And if he's on the field, he has all the tools to make something happen and be fantasy relevant. And again, this is a guy who you can take, and after week 3, if he has no catches, you can drop him, right? But I think it's a high upside pick. It is a low floor, but Wan'Dale could be a flyer that late in your drafts. And finally, in round 16, when it comes to drafting rookie quarterbacks, as you see on the left side, you have C.J. Stroud, Khalil Shakur, right? A guy who could step up, or not Khalil Shakur. You see C.J. Stroud, Michael Mayer, and John Mechie. I misspoke there, but when it comes to drafting rookie quarterbacks, the question you have to ask yourself, to me, is what if, right? Stroud, he's a rookie, number 2 pick, and we're expecting rookie growing pains like any other logical person would do. But what if he doesn't have any? What if from day one he's comfortable and he makes everyone around him better? What if, this guy can have a season like Justin Fields last year and be very fantasy relevant? I'm not saying he's going to win a bunch of games in Houston, but for fantasy sakes, what if he can be a top 10 guy in his first year? I'm just saying there's always a chance, and especially in round 16, why not take a chance like that here early on, as he's going to be the day one starter. But John Mechie, he's an amazing guy. He's an amazing talent, right, coming out of Alabama. He just had some unfortunate health concerns and conditions that held him back from playing last year. But according to all reports, he's back in Houston. He's playing. He's 100%. He's ready to go. And maybe C.J. Stroud and John Mechie can find a spark here, as that team is projected to be down a lot in games. They're going to have to pass the ball a lot, and that can lead to a lot of fantasy production. But the rookie I want to dive into is Michael Mayer, right? And again, in most leagues, we're going to be in the last rounds of our draft at this point. So why not take another flyer? And to me, if Michael Mayer shows promise, right, he could just be another trade asset, around the midseason mark. We're going to do a weekly run through of all of my leagues here in 2023 during the season, and you guys are going to notice I send out a lot of trade offers. I believe Michael Mayer can be a guy that could get me a superstar here at the midseason mark. But Michael Mayer, he was an early second-round pick from the Las Vegas Raiders, and he's walking into a 100-plus target season, right? He's replacing Darren Waller, who couldn't stay healthy, in the entire time he was there in Las Vegas. Aside from Davante Adams in Las Vegas, there's no real target competition. Maybe Hunter Renfrow you're worried about. I'm only worried about Davante Adams, right? And this is a guy who's going to be the starting tight end from day one, and he has Jimmy G as his quarterback. Jimmy G, if we know anything, he loves to check down and get his tight ends involved. Plus, this is a guy in Jimmy G who used to throw to George Kittle. And who, I'm going to ask you guys, is Michael Mayer's pro comp? You guessed it. It's George Kittle, right? So Jimmy G's walking into a situation with a young tight end, right? But he's going to remind Jimmy G a lot of a guy who's played with for years and years in San Fran and George Kittle. Again, this is simply a flyer of a pick. But why not take a rookie, right? In round 16, don't take a third quarterback. Don't take a seventh receiver, eighth receiver in redraft formats. Take Michael Mayer. Take a guy who is a rookie. He has upside, and this is a guy who can have 70, 80 catches this season, and you can get him in the last round of your draft. Right, so just to recap here, in the rounds 9 through 16, we had David Njoku. We dived into Antonio Gibson, Russell Wilson, Chigoziem Okonkwo. Again, I'm getting used to that name. Greg Dulcich, right? MVS, Wan'Dale Robinson, and Michael Mayer. So, we dove into 3 tight ends. We had a running back, 4 tight ends, I think, on this episode. So if you can't tell, I think I'm going to go tight end late this year. And I love the upside of some of these guys later in the drafts. But we dove into 4 tight ends here, a couple receivers, a running back or 2. And it's going to be a fun year, even a quarterback, right? So we covered all of the main positions in fantasy football. But that is going to do it for today's show. I mean, simply put, it's another great episode in the books. We'll see you guys tomorrow for a mock draft with some trades. So it should be tons of fun here. I don't know if Load Management co-host is going to be back, but we'll have to see. As Friday, we'll be back with some more fantasy content as we're going to be going through 9 through 16 yet again, but we're going to be saying the players not to draft. Don't take a chance on these guys. Don't take a flyer on these guys late in your drafts. Should be tons of fun. But again, I want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys for 300 subs on the channel. We're going to continue to pump out great content for you guys weekly basis, right? We're not going to stop here, and we can't thank you guys enough for all the support we've had on the channel so far, but we're only getting started, right? So if you guys enjoy what you're listening to at any point, drop a like, subscribe to the channel, share the podcast, all that good stuff, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. Stay happy, stay healthy. We're out.